Hey peeps, I'm Michelle.
Hey, it's Kat.
Hey everyone, I'm Natalie.
Hey, what up? It's Faith.
Hey, it's Lori.
Hey, Sydney.
And this is the Red Lips and Mic Drops podcast.
Red lips and mic drops, big hips and lip gloss. I'm talking issues and our thoughts. The world's unfair, so let's talk.
Welcome back to Red Lips Mic Drops. Kat, it's time to roll the wheel.
Yes, bitch! Woo! All right, ready, guys? Here we go. Wheel topic for this episode. The wheel topic?
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
Do it.
Give me what I'm asking.
Dun, 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 dun.
Ooh.
Spiritual abuse and finding freedom from it is our topic for today. Who's going to take it first?
Not me.
Not me.
Our spiritual queens.
We should define what that means. Are we talking about being too spiritual and going to the extremes?
Or it could just be, somebody who's been abused in the spiritual world, whether it be at a church or by a spiritual healer. Do you know what I mean? We should define what we're going to talk about because, there's people, cults can use spiritual, religious beliefs to abuse mentally and physically the people in them and stuff like that.
I think a lot of that also comes it's big into the shaming. Like, if you don't believe this, then you're not really Christian, or you're not really XYZ. You're not really blah, blah, blah. You can't be a member of this unless you believe 150 million %. Whether it makes rational sense or not, it doesn't matter. But you believe, or you're dumb or stupid or ignorant or whatever.
Right. Just people being like, I'm a spiritual healer, and then kind of abusing their clientele through that, right? Like manipulation, whether it's mental abuse or whatnot, just to kind of give their narrative out to them. Almost like almost like a narcissist, right? Like where they use it as a spirit, like, oh, well, I'm a spiritual healer and I'm, but I'm going to really mentally mess with you because I'm using that word, stuff like that.
What was that podcast you were listening to? Remember?
Well, back when I was studying forensics, because people don't know, but I was, going through forensic psychology and all that through college, and we had to study cults and leaders like that. They are narcissists, and they will find that they position themselves in power by manipulation through the religious beliefs or the spirituality. And so there was a podcast I was listening to, and it's called "Is This Really Happening?" is the podcast, and it's huge. And there was a priest on there who he was from the Catholic Church, and he used to molest young boys, and he's on there talking about what he did. And I know the person that runs the podcast was a little nervous to bring him on, but he's like, if we're going to be real, we got to be real. And that person, admits that he did what he did because of his position of power, and that it was easy for him to manipulate those boys. I don't think he fully gets what he did, because in the long run, he still used the religion to heal himself, right? But anybody that's going to spiritually abuse you is coming from a place of that's the power they're going to hold over you.
Because when I was a kid, I never understood it. I was born and raised Roman Catholic, but I personally don't connect with it at all. Like, there are things that I just don't agree with at all. I don't understand it. It still doesn't make sense to me. And I practice whatever connection to my higher power in a certain way. But whenever people would be around and saying, oh my gosh, so-and-so is Baptist, or so-and-so is, XYZ religion, it's so shady. It's like, why is that shady? That's just, I never understood the judgment. It was like, just let them practice what they want.
Well, I mean, I grew up in the church, and I'm I'm Eastern Orthodox, right? Like Greek Orthodox, whatever you want to call it. And I never had those experiences. And I was always, my relationship with God was always mine. And I was kind of raised that way. Like each one of us have our own relationships, even though we did go to church, I still do. And I do other spiritual things, and I do things where maybe the Bible doesn't say, but I always want to say to people that want to judge you, they miss that lesson in the Bible where it says you're not supposed to be judging anybody, only God
Exactly.
is.
Total
But
hypocrisy.
you'll never hear anybody, when I used to study this, you'll never hear anyone that has been, gotten into a cult or spiritually abused, unless they were born into it. Every one of those people were lost or looking for direction somewhere in their life. And that's why they turn to those things, because whatever appealed to them and however the person made that appealing to them was what drew them in. Like the Nexium thing, like all those people were like, how did we not see this? And it was because he mentally taught those people how to live their best lives.
He was good too. I have to say, he was good. Like I can understand why they would have totally normal guy, pretty much.
Yeah, he made them get out of their own way and enlighten themselves and get to a place of confidence that they never had before. And that's how that works. Michelle, tell you, they condition you. And so part of that conditioning is to be this amazing person to people and teach them, right? When they do this religious or spiritual abuse, they teach them these amazing things. You feel better than you've ever felt about yourself.
That's true.
And
yeah, you find the broken, right? That's what they do. They find the broken.
Yep.
They give them what they want is to feel better. When they come back from these like cult-like experiences, they're dumbfounded. Like, how in the hell did this ever happen to me?
Yep.
How could I've ever done this? And even you have to take this time of like reconditioning, detoxing yourself of like what really even occurred in this situation.
Michelle, like it does happen. It's not just cults, it happens with individuals. Like in my past abusive relationship with a narcissist, I was told to sit down at one point and listen to an audio recording on emotional intelligence because I didn't have any and he did. And he read all these books and it's going to make me better. And I didn't leave. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't think at the time, I was really offended. I remember being like, excuse me, like, don't tell me I don't know how to communicate with people. I'm very open about my emotions. I wear my heart on my sleeve. So I was offended, but I didn't leave because at the end of the day, this person love bombs and convinces you that they just were looking out for your best interest.
If you step away, then what kind of a person are you? And because all of my experiences with the church or with various different entities of the religious sort were not positive. They were all negative. And because I remember being a young girl and wanting to go to church, like I wanted to go to church. My whole family wasn't going to church, but I wanted to go to church. And I remember walking up the steps, and it was down south. So it was a big old Baptist church. And I was walking up the steps, probably 7 years old or so, 8 years old. And I got up to the top, and the gentleman was holding the doors in a beautiful suit. Like he looked he was an older gentleman, very like put together, whatever. And he looked at me and he goes, "Do you have a donation?" And I said, "No." He goes, "You're not allowed in." So I walked away. I'm like, okay, I never went back. That was like one of my earliest memories of a church. And it's like, okay, money is the root of all evil. Why does the church want it so much? Why are they so for it? Like, what is this purpose?
Yeah.
And then several years ago, I was like, okay, like I'm getting all this information. Like my husband grew up like Catholic and then Lutheran and all these things. And it's very prevalent up here in Minnesota. And so I'm like, okay, I'll go to church, whatever. I'll try it. We'll try this. And so I go in and I'm feeling very conflicted with all of this. And I'm like, okay, do I stay and do this or do I walk away? And I'm like, I want my husband, we have a relationship. So I want to make him happy as well. And I will try different things, And so I go to this church and I'm like, okay, are you all in with this? Are you good with this? Like, whatever. And he's like, yeah, let's go to church. So I dove in. I'm an all in or all out person. And like 6 months later, I raised my head and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm spending like every night cooking dinner here. I'm doing all of this. My business is suffering. Like, my relationships are suffering because I'm giving everything I have in order to, and then I went back and looked at my notes and it was like, I was shamed into doing these things. Like, if you're not at the level you want to be, it must be because you're not praying enough. It must be because you're not giving enough of your time. It must be because you're not doing exactly what I told you to do. And it's like, I don't need that bullshit. Like that. No, I'm doing, I do not go to church. I was not raised to be religious either way. So that's nothing in my childhood like that, but it was just an interesting thing, like all this stuff. And then I think of the Waco stuff and I watched the mini series on Waco. And it's like how innocently people come in. It's because they feel like they're broken. They feel like something is wrong with them. They feel like they're not enough and that this other person has got that magic key, that magic morsel to give them what they need or show enlightenment on where they need to go, what they need to do, and who they need to become or can become. But the other person is the only one that has that piece. And it's like, so this isn't used just in religion. This is also abused in like the coaching industry. It's also used in like the dating industry. It's also abused like pretty much in anything you ever want to go to. It's abused.
Yeah, make people feel like shit about themselves so you can sign up for my program. Like you're Oh, and can we also just real quick acknowledge the fact that Faith is wearing a cape? Like, we knew you were wearing a cape, but I feel like our audience should also Faith is recruiting us. She's recruiting us.
Faith will forever be known as mistress of the universe.
You know, the one that Leah Ramini goes over, and again, we're not going to say that on here. You know, and I had to study this in psychology. That book that was written for them, the first book that was written for them, is a psychological book, and Michelle would know that too, right, with her expertise. And it is teaching you that everything that's happened in your life is because you've attracted that to happen to get you to that next level, which can be very true. But they take it to the next level. Like if you were physically or sexually abused, that's your fault, right? Not right, but right. So they take it to that next level and they convince these people that they can cure them of those things. And that's usually what happens in a spiritual abusive setting. I dated a guy in Florida when I lived there who was a born again Southern Baptist. And he asked me to go to church with him. And I was very open to it because I grew up in the church. So I went, and at the end of the service, I don't know if they call them ministers or preachers, asked me to come and have a talk with him. And I'm like, okay, let's go. I know what this is going to happen. I know where this is leading. And he sat in front of me and he's like, so, you know, we would like you to ask God to save you. And I'm like, excuse me? And he's like, well, you've never asked God to be saved. And I'm like, well, that's because, no. And I was like, well, that's because I never left.
Yeah. Well, that's
like, what? And I'm like, I don't need to be saved. I've been doing this my whole life. I've been praying and asking for forgiveness and going to confession and repenting my whole life. I never left. But that piece of crap or piece of shit that I'm dating, who was a piece of shit, became born again to make himself feel better about the piece of shit that he was. Wow. So again, I was in this small situation where if I was so vulnerable, I could have easily been manipulated in that moment. Like,
fully,
you know, pressured, manipulated, and then like, I need God to save me, right?
Can I just say something? I will not say who this is. I've said enough about people. I'm not doing anything. I am doing everything anonymously from here on out because I don't want to hear about it from a certain someone, and you know who you are, biatch.
We're coming for the government.
You know who you are.
For the church.
So somebody in my life is a devout Catholic. Okay. Again, grew up Roman Catholic. We go to this store. You guys remember the hippie stores? Like they still have them. Like there's like shrooms all over the walls and it's cool. It's like,
those are my people. They're my people.
Like in the mall. I walk in and the dude at the counter, I'm like 7. the dude at the counter, I'm with the devout Catholic in my family. And the guy at the counter has gauges, like massive gauges in his ear. He's got tats all over. And I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. I think it's great. But I was like, no, I didn't really acknowledge anything. And the devout Catholic with me decided to ask this gentleman. I'm like, I know what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen. It's going to be embarrassing. So she says, is that a tattoo on your arm? And I'm like, oh, here we freaking go. And the guy says, yeah, it is. And he gets so excited because like when you're asked about your tattoos, it's usually like there's a symbol. So you get excited to talk about it and whatever. So he's trying to show her the tattoo. And she's like, you know what? Or no, she says, are you Catholic? I'm like, what? And the dude's like, I'm not, ma'am. And she's like, you're going to go to hell. I was like,
I have personally
had
had
tattoos.
that.
You're going to go to hell. Like you're going to go to hell because you have tattoos.
I've had that experience. Like,
Yes.
to my face. I was about 9 or 10 years old and I was my parents divorced when I was about 5 years old. And I didn't know my dad once we divorced. Now, of course, he's like my fucking hero. But at the time, I didn't know him, but all I really knew about him was he's very spiritual. He's Native American. And my little kid brain is like, okay, I can get close to my dad if I start looking into that kind of real, like borderline pagan spirituality, Native American stuff. And I started showing that, like collecting. I used to collect rocks and I put them in a Tupperware, those things that you get from the grocery store filled with potato salad. I used to fill them with rocks and water and collect them. They'd grow shit in them, but my mom hated it, I'm sure. I was like, no, it's my collection. It's my world collection, Yeah. And I had a elderly member of my family straight up tell me, you're a fucking witch. You're going to burn. You are not allowed to come to my house anymore. And I was like, whoa, bro, that is not my mom stepped in too, because she was Wiccan before she had me. She's not anymore, but for a while she went through, and I think that's great. So like getting open-minded enough to experience different religions. Because how do you know if one's right for you if you've only been in that one?
Well, and they always shun them too.
Right.
Right. Another religion, which is like, why? What secrets are
and
you
then
doing?
In high school, I dated a narcissist. He was very Christian. And he straight up told me, oh, Sydney, I really love you and I really care about you. And I want to spend eternity with you in heaven. And I need you to get saved because you're a witch.
I had that happen to me. Yeah. Yes. And
Well,
I not because I'm a witch. I kind of wish I were a witch. I think I was in another life. Like, I really think I probably was. But I had somebody say, well, I'm obviously, I'm worried about you because I don't feel that you're going to go to heaven. I was like 19 and I said, excuse me, what do you mean? Like because you cuss a lot. I'm like, because I cuss a lot? Like, really? That's so, I swore one time around this person, FYI. And I'm like, what? And I said, well, why do you think you are? And they said, because I do good deeds every day.
Right.
I'm like, well, bitch, so do I. What do you mean?
What's a good
God likes my swearing and sense of humor. Okay. That's how he designed me.
Yes.
I was brought to a convention for that. And I did it. I went through with the whole thing and I was young. My mother was like, oh my God, you're in a cult. And I'm like, well, you're also we have people in our family telling people they're going to hell because they're not Catholic.
Right.
Everybody's in a freaking cult. So, it was cool. And there was like a band and I was having a freaking blast. I'm like, save me. Yes. Like I was having a great old time.
Young people that like get into like the LGBT population. I have a couple teenagers that I see that their parents are very religious, but they fall into the LGBT family and they've been, let's take you to church and pray away the gay kind of thing. Especially if we, bring it down to like the teenagers and young people that are really impressionable upon religiosity and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, and how about the bakeries too? Like, we can't serve you because you're gay. I'm like, oh, hell no, you don't mess with my gays. Like, I'm sorry. Like,
right?
No way in hell. And that's like, it does like it rubs off into society then. That's horrible.
Right. My experience when I was told you're a witch, you're going to burn, which is silly because like I'm spiritualist, Native. like, I don't even have a label on what I do, but I showed interest. I was a young child and all of my family was getting together and they were going to church, and I was like, oh, I'd like to go. It wasn't my immediate family, it was like cousins, things like that. And they're all going, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would love to join in just to see what it's like. And one of the kids in the group was like, no, if you walked into the church, you'd burn.
That's
Oh my
like
God.
traumatic too. That's
Yeah.
scarring.
It is
So then for a really long time, I straight up, every time I walked past a church, my skin would itch and I'd get anxious. And like, I literally thought I was going to burst into flames if I walked into the church.
But listen,
So I just avoided it all like the plague. And I think that that's really influenced the way that I view most religions.
Mhm.
So that's why I don't take to claim one. Now I've said to people before, my family reunions are really interesting. My dad's Native. I have a brother that's full, like, devout atheist, like 100%. I have 2 Christian sisters. I have a flying spaghetti monster religion, like ordained minister in the flying spaghetti monster religion, just because he was like, well, fuck it. If you can be a minister, so can I. But we are a really open-minded family, so we can collectively have really interesting conversations and it doesn't turn into an argument.
Awesome. That's music to my ears.
Right.
See, my brother and I joke about the 2 of us, if we ever walked into a church, we would burn, because we were raised with 0 religion in our lives.
Yeah.
My father was raised Protestant in the United Church in Newfoundland, which is a very small island province in Canada. And when he came to Ontario, he didn't continue with any of that. And his mother was really upset about that, and that caused turmoil. But my mother's mother was in another religion and escaped that religion. No religion was allowed in the house at all. Don't talk about it. Do not bring it up. And my mother was raised with 0 religion. So my parents were like, we don't do any of that. So why are we going to expose our children to that? We don't believe in any of that. Do we believe in God? I don't know. We don't. They say they're agnostic, right? So that's kind of there might be something out there, but there's no belief. When I can remember being young and my friends were all going to Sunday school, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what this is about. And I went for a little bit and I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I don't remember getting anything from it other than, okay, they go hang out and talk about God and do crafts, right? Like that's what it was. Mm-hmm. So for me, religion never had an impact one way or the other than I don't really know what I believe in, other than, yeah, maybe there's something out there, but maybe there's not.
There's a huge misconception as well between religion and spirituality, which are 2 very, 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 very different things. And I know that a lot of the churches like to pretend like they have a lot of spirituality when actually they shut that stuff down so fast. Like they don't like yoga. They don't like a lot of different things that are like, oh, well, why don't you like yoga? Like it's meditation, it's clearing your mind. Like, no, all the bad things can seep in and take hold. And at that moment in time, and I'm like, dude, come on. For real?
Another thing too, it can go the other way too. I was dated somebody who went from not devout Catholicism. He was kind of like forced into it because he had to go to Catholic school growing up, then turned to be an atheist. And I dated him. And for a long time, it was a very, very serious relationship. And people are like, oh, I would never do that. Like friends of mine, I would never date somebody who's an atheist. Why are you doing that? And I'm like, because I don't look at him as a bad person for having his own beliefs or spirituality, different opinions. Like I don't look at it that way. And I never will. I honestly never will. I really won't.
Well, I've always had an issue with, if all the religions are the same and like they're all, God is the head power in each religion, right? We all seek him, whatever. How, and they all go off of the Bible. How in the world do we have so many different religions? How can you pick and choose the points that you want your followers to have? Like, how do you determine like what they should be focusing on and how to interpret that Bible? Like what gives you the power and the authority? Oh, I don't like this, so I'm just going to create this religion. So we're going to totally bash that one because they don't know what they're talking about. Like,
and it's like no religion knows really what they're talking about.
Crazy.
Well, I think that's just the history of religion and how it
Yeah.
started, and then how things branched off, and especially at a time back then where people were seeking something more
Right.
in their life. So, and then interpretations just got distorted along the way. But that's just like any, like the Nexium guy or the other one that we're not going to say and stuff like that. They've all taken ways to say, well, what these people are doing is not correct and what we're doing is right. And then you get that following. But religion started more, as a means to give people hope for something in their lives when religion started. So it's, it's not to say that, I don't know how to put it in words. It's not to say that all religion is bad or anything.
No.
It's about your
It's
interpretation.
distorted.
Yeah, it's about your interpretation. It's about how you live your life through that too, Yeah.
Literally, King James rewrote the Bible because they weren't educated. So
Yeah.
he was able to change it, and no one was like, hello. I have the Maleficaium, which is the hammer of the witches. It's literally the handbook that the church used to determine if you were a witch and how they would handle you.
Oh.
Don't even.
So for somebody like me who has always put religion and spirituality together as one thing, because I know that there are people that are spiritual healers and all of those things. What is the difference?
So for me,
Different for everyone. Yeah.
yeah, I think for me, just for myself, I don't know if anyone else believes this or not, but for me, religion is something that's indoctrinated in you, and spirituality is your connection, your only connection to your spiritual superpower, whatever you believe that to be, whether it's God, the universe, whatever it is, that's yours and yours alone, and you don't have to use anyone else to tap into it. But religion, you have to go through someone else. Like, it's an indoctrination. For me, it's an indoctrination.
Religion is structured and it's like a textbook, but spirituality, which is what I connect with most, is like the colorful world of like, this is whatever you want it to be. It's the journey.
Right. And I think that reflects back to what we were talking about earlier with the fluidity of spirituality. That's why it's so hard and difficult to tame. And you don't see a lot of those types of authority figures and the cults surrounding them and the abuse of power. Whereas when you have that textbook or the structural, it's very easy to tell people you're doing it wrong and here's why. And that's when you have the abuse of power, because they don't have, for me, spirituality is individuality. Like, it gives me the freedom to, today I'm going to believe this. Today I'm praying to the fucking sun. Okay. Tomorrow I'm going to walk out in the ground and literally ground myself outside in the dirt and just believe in the universe.
But then it's like,
the universe.
Can people with that thought, can people make their own religion based on their spirituality? Right.
Absolutely. And that's when it becomes, okay, my beliefs, I'm going to write them down and I'm going to force them on you. That's when I become a spiritual abuser.
Well, spirituality is the concern for the soul as opposed to the materialistic or the physical. And so whatever speaks to your soul is your spirituality, right? And so if somebody's like, well, what speaks to my soul, a narcissist is leading people and abusing them, they're going to somehow, and then they figure out they can use their spirituality to get that.
Yeah.
Like King, we're talking about narcissists. They've been around from the beginning of mankind, right? So, so it's just, and then it's knowing your own soul, like learning your own soul, because that's the easiest way to protect yourself.
6 women on the internet coming together for intimate conversations about difficult topics with soft hearts and strong voices. This is Red Lips and Mic Drops.
Red lips and mic drops, thick hips and lip gloss. I'm talking issues and our thoughts. The world's unfair, so let's talk. Red lips and mic drops, thick hips and lip gloss. I'm talking issues and our thoughts. The world's unfair, so let's talk.